Welcome to the Deep Dive. It is March 6th, 2026, and over the past week, we have all watched a regional military conflict just violently collide with global energy markets, macroeconomic stability, and really the digital infrastructure of the world's biggest corporations.
Yeah, it has been an intense week.
It really has. Today, we are looking at a massive stack of sources. We've got geopolitical intelligence reports, financial analyses from Goldman Sachs, granular corporate treasury manuals for SAP systems, and Office of Foreign Assets Control compliance
A
documents.
lot of ground to cover.
Exactly. Our mission for this deep dive is to synthesize all of this so that you understand exactly how a missile strike in the Middle East impacts global inflation tech stocks and even a company's customer support desk.
Right. But before we jump into the timeline, I do want to add a quick note on the sources we're using today.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
We're looking at some heavily charged military events here between the United States, Israel, and Iran. We want to be super clear to you, the listener, that we aren't taking sides or endorsing any political or military views here. Our sole objective is to impartially report the factual content and the ideas contained within this stack of research. We are just doing this to help you understand the global economic ripple effects of these events, plain and simple.
Okay, let's unpack this. The trigger event for everything we're going to discuss today happened just a few days ago on February 28th, 2026.
Right.
According to the intelligence briefings in our SAC, the United States and Israel launched joint strikes. The operation was called Epic Fury,
Epic Fury, yes.
and it targeted Iranian military and nuclear sites. Now, this operation resulted in the death of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
And the response was immediate.
Immediate. In retaliation, Iran launched over 1,000 missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles at U.S., Israeli, and Gulf assets.
Which is just a staggering volume.
It is, and almost instantly, the focus of the entire global economy snapped to one tiny, incredibly vulnerable stretch of water.
The Strait of Hormuz. To really grasp the sheer scale of the economic shockwave we're seeing, you have to visualize the geography of this area. The Strait of Hormuz is essentially a 54-kilometer bottleneck.
Which is nothing.
It's nothing. Think about that. That is roughly 33 miles wide at its narrowest point.
It's basically the distance of a slightly stretched out marathon.
Right, exactly. Yet through that tiny confined passage flows 20 million barrels of oil every single day.
20 million.
That is 1/5 of total global consumption and roughly 27% of all global seaborne oil trade.
Just going through that one little gap.
On top of that, 22% of the world's liquefied natural gas, or LNG, passes through there. It is arguably the single most critical energy choke point on the planet.
And the threat to that specific choke point became incredibly real, incredibly fast. One of the intelligence reports highlighted a chilling quote from an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps commander.
Yeah, I read that.
He went on Iranian state media and threatened to set ablaze any vessel attempting passage. He was effectively announcing to the world that the strait was closed for business.
Which brings up a crucial distinction we need to make here. Legally and formally, the strait hasn't been declared closed through recognized international maritime channels.
Wait, so technically a ship could still try to sail through? The international waters are legally open?
Legally, yes. But operationally, it doesn't matter. The reality is a functional paralysis. It's a de facto blockade.
Right, because of the physical danger.
Exactly. When you have kinetic attacks, actual missiles and drones targeting commercial vessels, combined with widespread GPS jamming across Gulf waters, the legal status doesn't mean a thing to a ship's captain.
Or to an insurance underwriter.
Oh, especially the underwriters. Commercial operators have largely halted movement. If you look at the vessel tracking data right now, there are at least 150 massive oil tankers just anchored in open Gulf waters.
Sitting there burning cash.
Just sitting there. Vessel traffic has dropped by 70%. The biggest carriers in the world, companies like Maersk CMA, CGM, and Hapag-Lloyd, they've all suspended their transits through the region.
I mean, you look at a map and you might be thinking, surely there's a workaround, right? Like a bypass road when the highway's closed.
You would think so.
But the geopolitical analysts in our stack highlight a massive problem with that line of thinking.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, there are simply no good alternatives. You can't just detour around the Arabian Peninsula easily.
There are some pipelines, though, right?
There is some pipeline infrastructure that can bypass the strait, specifically Saudi Arabia's East-West pipeline to the Red Sea and the United Arab Emirates Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline.
Okay, so why not just use those?
Because their combined capacity is only about 3.5 million barrels per day. That covers just 17% of the typical flow. You literally cannot squeeze 20 million barrels through a 3.5 million barrel pipe.
The math just doesn't work.
It doesn't. Because of this, the world, and especially Asian markets like China and Japan, which receive the vast majority of this flow, is suddenly cut off from its primary energy source.
Which perfectly explains the macroeconomic earthquake we are seeing right now. I was looking through the Goldman Sachs financial analysis in our stack, and they estimate that an $18 per barrel real-time risk premium is now completely baked into oil prices.
It's massive.
This massive fear tax has pushed Brent crude past $90 a barrel in a matter of days.
And Goldman breaks down this risk mathematically, noting that it's convex.
Convex meaning the worse the disruption gets, the faster the price accelerates. It's not just a steady, predictable climb.
Precisely. It's not a straight line. They estimate that a full 1-month closure of the strait with no alternative offsets adds $15 to every single barrel.
Wow.
If those pipeline bypasses we just mentioned are used to their absolute maximum capacity, it still adds $12 a barrel.
Even with the bypass.
Even with it. And even a best-case scenario of a partial 50% closure for a month adds $4. And we aren't just talking about oil here.
Natural gas, too.
Yeah. European natural gas, the Dutch TTF benchmark is up 74%. If this disruption lasts over 2 months, the analysts warn we are looking at natural gas crossing 100 euros per megawatt hour.
And that energy shock is hitting the U.S. economy at the absolute worst possible moment. We're looking at a terrifying macroeconomic cocktail here.
A perfect storm.
Surging energy costs act as an immediate, unavoidable tax on every consumer and business. You have to put gas in your car. You have to heat your warehouse. You can't just opt out.
Right.
And this sudden energy tax is colliding with the February jobs report, which surprisingly showed a loss of 92,000 jobs.
Pushing U.S. unemployment up to 4.4%.
Exactly.
What's fascinating here is the reaction of the bond market to that specific cocktail.
Because it wasn't what people expected.
Not at all. Normally, if the economy loses 92,000 jobs, bond traders rush to safety, they buy bonds, and that drives yields down. It's a classic signal of a slowing economy where inflation is cooling off.
But not this time.
But this energy shock has completely rewritten the playbook. Instead of dropping, the 10-year U.S. Treasury yield spiked to 4.17%.
Which is huge.
It is. The swaps markets, which bet on what the Federal Reserve will do, went from pricing in 3 rate cuts this year to a 97% chance that the Fed will just hold rates steady.
So the whole narrative of a soft landing for the economy, cooling inflation without causing a recession, just vanished over a single weekend.
Completely vanished. The bond market is now genuinely fearing a return to 1970s-style sticky stagflation.
The worst of both worlds.
Exactly. That is the nightmare scenario where inflation stays stubbornly high because of supply shocks, like an energy crisis, but underlying economic growth stagnates, hence the job losses.
And that fear is ripping the stock market right down the middle. It's creating very clear winners and losers. High-growth tech stocks, the ones that have been flying high and carrying the market, are facing a brutal valuation squeeze.
Yeah, they are getting hammered.
We're talking about heavyweights like NVIDIA, Apple, and Microsoft. Why? Because when Treasury yields spike to 4.17%, that acts as a really heavy discount rate on their future earnings.
It brings their massive valuations back down to earth fast.
Meanwhile, real estate is completely frozen because 30-year mortgages are suddenly back near 6.17%. But on the flip side, you have the energy giants, ExxonMobil, Chevron. They are surging.
Definite winners there.
And there's this new category the financial reports call ALO stocks. Heavy assets, low obsolescence.
Right. Companies like Nextera Energy.
Exactly. They are surging as safe havens because they produce tangible physical value in a high inflation environment.
They own the infrastructure.
Yeah. But as we dig deeper into the sources, it becomes clear that the impact goes way beyond the stock market ticker on CNBC. It's hitting the actual operational balance sheets of almost every multinational company on Earth.
This is where we transition from abstract macroeconomic theory to the very real, very messy reality of corporate finance.
Right. And I want to ask you, the listener, directly, why should you care about this if you aren't trading oil futures or managing a massive stock portfolio? Well, our corporate treasury sources dive deep into a concept called the working capital triple squeeze.
And it is hitting businesses across the globe right now,
effectively choking their cash flow.
This is where a geopolitical crisis literally becomes a corporate cash flow crisis. The triple squeeze refers to the simultaneous destruction of a company's cash conversion cycle across 3 specific metrics.
Let's break them down.
First, you have days sales outstanding, or DSO. This is how long it takes your customers to pay you. Typically, this might be 45 days.
Pretty standard.
But right now, because of the conflict, it's jumping to 80 days. Customers in the Middle East are invoking force majeure clauses, essentially saying, act of God war broke out, and they are simply stopping their payments.
Okay, so the money coming in slows down dramatically. What's the second squeeze?
Second, you have days inventory outstanding, or DIO. This measures how long your inventory sits before it's sold and delivered. That is spiking right now from 30 days to 70 days.
Because of the ships.
Because millions of dollars of your in-transit inventory are sitting on those 150 tankers we mentioned earlier, just anchored in the Gulf going absolutely nowhere.
So to put this in perspective, imagine you sell heavy machinery like tractors. Your buyer in Dubai suddenly can't pay you for 80 days because the regional banking system is in chaos.
Right.
Meanwhile, the tractors you already shipped are stuck on a boat in the Gulf for 70 days, so you can't deliver them and recognize the revenue. You're bleeding cash on two fronts.
And then there's the third squeeze, which really tightens the vice.
Look at the third one.
The third metric is days payable outstanding, or DPO. This is how long you have to pay your own suppliers. Normally, a company might have a comfortable 60-day window, but in a global crisis, panicked suppliers don't want to wait.
They want their money now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The guy who sells you the engines for those tractors is panicking. He demands cash against documents or immediate prepayments. So your DPO shrinks from 60 days to 30 days.
Wow. So your customers are paying you way slower? Your inventory is physically stuck on a boat, and your suppliers are demanding their money twice as fast?
Precisely. The mathematical result of that triple squeeze is that a company's working capital requirement effectively doubles overnight. You need twice as much cash on hand just to keep the lights on and run the exact same operations you were running a week ago.
Just to stand still.
And remember the macro environment we just talked about. This need for double the cash is happening at the exact moment when banks are terrified of risk and tightening their credit lines.
And insurance companies are actively canceling war risk coverage for global shipping.
It is a perfect storm for a corporate treasurer.
So what does this all mean for the actual people running these companies? Let's step away from the global stock exchanges for a second and zoom in on a corporate treasurer sitting in an office in Chicago watching this unfold on their monitors.
They are on the front lines.
They can't control the U.S. Navy. They can't control the price of Brent crude. How do you manage a business when your supply chain is frozen and your cash needs just doubled?
It's a daunting position.
It really is. The corporate manuals in our stack point to an incredibly unexpected lifeline: SAP software.
Which sounds a bit dry at first.
It does. We usually think of enterprise resource planning software stuff like SAP S/4HANA as just a giant, boring accounting ledger for HR and finance. But the source material describes how in 2026 it has evolved into a literal geopolitical sensor network and a corporate control tower.
It's a fundamental shift in how corporations defend themselves in real time. When a kinetic shock hits a choke point, like the Strait of Hormuz, corporate treasurers don't have days to hold committee meetings and react. They have minutes before the exposure becomes lethal.
Literally a 60-minute window.
The manuals outline a literal 60-minute playbook that a Fortune 500 treasurer executes using these advanced software systems.
What's the first step?
It starts with a module called Bank Communication Management, or BCM. In a crisis, this acts as an immediate kill switch. Within minutes of the conflict escalating, treasurers use it to mandate dual control approvals and block all unauthorized outgoing payments to the entire Gulf region.
You just freeze the outflow.
You stop the bleeding of capital immediately before it gets trapped in a sanctioned or frozen banking hub.
Wait, but if missiles are flying and the physical internet cables or regional SWIFT banking hubs actually go dark, hitting a kill switch in your software doesn't matter, right?
Why not?
Because the system is already broken. Your payments aren't going anywhere anyway.
That is exactly the nightmare scenario, and that's where the second tool, Advanced Payment Management, or APM, comes in. Think of APM as a universal translator and a digital triage center.
How does it work?
Say the main SWIFT banking network goes dark in a specific region because a server farm was hit. APM can instantly take your company's complex payment files, these native ISO 2022 pain.001 files, and flip them to alternative direct backup connections.
Like host-to-host or EBS connections.
Exactly, without a human having to manually rewrite a single line of code. It ensures your critical payments, like payroll for your employees in neighboring safe countries, still route around the conflict zone seamlessly.
Okay, that makes sense for external payments. But what if you need to move money internally? Like, Your European branch needs to fund your Asian manufacturing hub. But the global banks are completely paralyzed by conflict and compliance checks.
That's why they deploy the in-house cash module. It effectively acts like an internal central bank for the corporation.
An internal bank.
Yeah, instead of trying to route money between your global subsidiaries through external banks that are frozen, the software settles hundreds of millions of dollars in intercompany obligations internally on its own ledger.
Completely bypassing the paralyzed external system.
Completely.
It's almost like creating a sovereign corporate economy just to survive the week. And while all this is happening, the CFO is screaming for an update on the company's financial exposure to that massive oil spike and the interest rate jump we talked about earlier.
Which brings us to the final piece of the 60-minute playbook, Treasury and risk management. Treasurers use this module running transaction, OKYV, to do real-time digital stress tests.
So they can see the damage instantly.
Within minutes, they simulate what happens to the company's entire balance sheet if Brent crude spikes another 50% and interest rates shift by 200 basis points. It generates instant value-at-risk reports, so the executive team knows exactly where they stand financially.
That is incredible.
The ultimate takeaway from these corporate manuals is that corporate survival in 2026 isn't just about reading the news and hoping your supply chain holds up. It is about format agility. It's about technically decoupling your company's liquidity from regional kinetic instability using software as a shield.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because as much as software can act as a shield, it can also be a massive liability.
Very true.
Even if your treasury team executes that 60-minute playbook perfectly and protects the cash, there is a hidden trapdoor waiting for you, and it has nothing to do with finance.
It's about compliance.
Yes. I was reading through the compliance documents in our stack, and they highlight a report on a U.S. fintech company that got hit with a massive $3.1 million settlement from the Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC, back in December 2025.
A huge fine.
And here is the shocking part. The violation had absolutely nothing to do with moving money or trading assets or banking. They were fined millions over their customer support.
This specific enforcement action completely redefines the scope of sanctions risk for modern businesses. Let's analyze what actually happened. Over the course of a year, the customer support staff at this fintech company responded to routine inquiries from users who were physically located in Iran.
Just standard support tickets.
Just standard tickets.
Yeah.
In at least 12 specific instances, the support staff realized the users were being blocked by the company's geofencing, so they recommended that these users employ VPNs to bypass the company's own IP-based sanctions blocks.
So we're talking about a guy named Dave on the Midnight IT Help Desk. He's just trying to close out his support tickets, trying to be helpful to a user who can't log in, and he accidentally commits a federal sanctions violation.
That is exactly what happened. Under the law, OFAC classified that basic troubleshooting advice as a prohibited export of services to a sanctioned jurisdiction.
That's wild.
You don't have to move a single dollar to violate federal sanctions. Providing technical assistance to bypass a block is enough. And this brings us to a massive recent regulatory shift that every company operating globally needs to understand. OFAC recently doubled its statute of limitations for sanctions violations.
Extending it from 5 years to 10 years?
Yes.
Let me get this straight. A mistake made today by a low-level employee trying to close a chat ticket during this massive, confusing geopolitical crisis is a legal liability until 2036.
Exactly. Every single customer support chat log, every manually bypassed screening alert, every hasty transaction approved during the chaos of this 2026 Hormuz crisis will carry an open audit liability window stretching a full decade.
That is terrifying for a compliance officer.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it means companies can absolutely no longer rely on static terms of use documents to protect themselves. You can't just put a legal disclaimer on your website and call it a day.
That's not enough anymore.
Not at all. The compliance documents specifically mention that advanced tools like Descartes visual compliance and dynamic denied party screening algorithms have to be deeply embedded into the daily workflows of every single employee.
So the whole company.
That means not just the legal team, not just the finance team running the SAP war room, but Dave on the customer support rep desk working the midnight shift.
Wow. We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started by looking at the physical reality of a 54-kilometer bottleneck in the Strait of Hormuz, and how an escalating conflict there triggered an immediate $18 fear tax on global oil prices.
A massive shock to the system.
We tracked how that sudden energy shock killed the soft landing narrative, driving the 10-year Treasury yield up to 4.17% and raising the ghost of 1970s stagflation.
Right.
We then looked at how this crisis causes a working capital triple squeeze, forcing corporations to use their SAP software systems as high-tech war rooms to defend their cash flow from failing supply chains.
Running that 60-minute playbook.
And finally, we uncovered the perilous 10-year trap of OFAC compliance, where even a helpful customer service chat about a VPN can trigger a multi-million-dollar federal fine. It is incredible how tightly woven all of these threads are.
It really highlights how interconnected physical geography, macroeconomic policy, and corporate digital infrastructure have become. You can't separate them anymore.
You really can't.
This raises an important question, which leads me to a final thought based on a very brief but chilling mention in the geopolitical intelligence reports regarding AI-enabled cyber warfare.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We've just spent this entire deep dive looking at how kinetic warfare, actual missiles and drones, shuts down physical shipping lanes and freezes the global economy. But what happens to the global economy when the next escalation isn't a missile hitting an oil tanker, but an AI-driven cyber strike permanently severing the digital banking and SWIFT corridors of an entire hemisphere?
That would change everything.
If your corporate software system is your only defense, how long can your company actually survive completely disconnected from the global digital grid?
That is a terrifying and fascinating question to leave you with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As always, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep exploring the incredible insights hiding in these sources. We will see you next time.